In June 2023, deep in the mist-covered wilderness of northwest Tasmania, a traveler drove toward Philosopher Falls. She parked her white Honda at the entrance, locked the doors, and stepped into the trees with her camera. Hours later, the forest was unchanged, but she was gone. Her car remained untouched, her belongings inside, her phone silent. How does a person vanish completely on a path so familiar to so many? It was a cold Saturday morning in the middle of June 2023, the kind of Tasmanian winter day when the clouds seem to rest just above the trees. In the small mining town of Waratah, a woman from Belgium named Celine Camer packed her camera, a light jacket, and a bottle of water into a small day bag. She was 31 years old, calm in manner, fond of solitude, and had spent the last few months wandering the remote corners of Tasmania to capture what she called the silence of nature. That week, she had been staying in a rented cottage on the edge of town. The locals knew her as polite but reserved, a traveler who smiled easily but spoke little. Someone who was more comfortable with landscapes than with people. Her accent marked her as European, but her curiosity was universal. She would often stop at the cafe across from the fuel station, order tea, and ask for directions to walking tracks. On the morning of June 17th, she told the owner she planned to visit Philosopher Falls, a short and popular trail leading to one of Tasmania's less-known waterfalls. It was meant to be a simple outing. Celine's car, a white Honda CR-V, was last seen driving out of Waratah just before 10. The road leading west toward the falls is narrow, flanked by eucalyptus and myrtle trees that grow denser with every kilometre. To most visitors, the Tarkin forest is beautiful, alive with mist, moss, and the sound of running water. But for those who know its moods, it can turn dangerous in hours. Winter brings sudden rain, fog, and darkness that falls early. Even experienced hikers keep an eye on the clock. She arrived at the Philosopher Falls car park late that morning. Her phone later confirmed her arrival through GPS logs automatically saved to her Google account. The car park, paved and small, was the last sign of civilization before the path entered the ancient rainforest. From there, the track descended slowly, following a wooden walkway slick with rain and lined with ferns that brushed the shoulders of anyone passing through. It was not her first hike alone. Friends back home often described her independence as both admirable and worrying. She preferred traveling without company, saying that solitude made her see the world more clearly. Yet on that morning, the forest was heavier than usual, wrapped in low fog. The trail's warning signs, posted for tourists, advised warm clothing and caution in wet weather. It is not known whether she saw them. Investigators would later recover her movements in remarkable detail. At 11:10 a.m., her phone connected to a nearby cell tower, showing she had begun walking. She stopped several times along the way, possibly to take photographs. Her digital footprint showed slow progress along the marked path. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, she neared the viewing platform, where the waterfall could be seen through the trees. It should have been the end of her walk, the moment to turn back toward the car park before the light faded. Instead, at 3:45 p.m., her GPS coordinates shifted abruptly away from the main trail. For reasons no one will ever fully understand, she left the path. Some believe she was following her phone's map app, searching for a better viewpoint. Others think she simply misjudged the distance between the track and the sound of water below. She crossed a small creek known locally as 7mm Creek, an area not covered by the tourist path. The terrain there changes quickly. Flat ground giving way to hidden dips and soft moss that conceals holes several meters deep. At 4:18 p.m., her phone recorded its last signal. The battery was not dead. The device simply lost connection, as if it had entered a valley or gone beyond service range. That timestamp became the last known proof of her life. Over the next few days, the forest went on as usual. Rain fell, the creek swelled. No one in Waratah knew she was missing. It wasn't unusual for travelers to go quiet for a while. Reception was poor and many preferred to disconnect. Her sister Amelie in Belgium sent a few messages asking if she had boarded the ferry to Melbourne, scheduled for June 21st. There was no reply. On the 22nd, Amelie tried again, then again 2 days later. Still silence. By the 26th, she reported Celine missing to Belgian police, who contacted Australian authorities. When the Tasmanian police received the notice, their first step was to check her registered vehicle. On the morning of June 27th, a local patrol drove up the narrow road to Philosopher Falls. The car was there, parked neatly at the entrance, locked, untouched. Inside were her personal belongings, backpack, extra clothes, water bottle, and her wallet. Everything appeared in order, as if she had stepped out only moments before. But the keys were gone, and so was she. That discovery triggered an immediate response. Within hours, the area was declared an active search zone. Officers called for the state emergency service, volunteer rescue teams, and a helicopter to survey the dense canopy. The rain was steady, the temperature close to freezing. Searchers described the place as silent, green, and endless. For the rest of that day, they searched within a 2-kilometer radius of the car park. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no items dropped along the path. By nightfall, the forest swallowed both light and sound. The team withdrew, planning to resume at dawn. Back in Vara, word spread quickly. Locals began to visit the cafe where she had last been seen, talking in quiet tones about how someone could disappear so close to town. Some offered to help with the search. Others shook their heads, remembering how easily fog and rain could turn the forest into a maze. That night, the car remained alone in the parking lot, its white roof glistening under the drizzle. To those who passed by, it looked ordinary, like a vehicle waiting for its owner to return. But the truth was already written in the silence around it. The silence of a trail that had closed behind her and never opened again. And from that cold Tasmanian evening onward, no one ever saw Celine Khmer again. The morning after the white Honda was found, June 28, 2023, the fog had not yet lifted when the first rescue units arrived at Philosopher Falls. Officers from the Tasmania Police Search and Rescue Division set up a temporary command post near the car park. The air was wet, cold enough to sting the hands, and the sound of helicopters circling above broke the stillness that had held the forest since Celine's last steps. Every search begins with a pattern. Maps were spread across folding tables, marked with grids, circles, and reference points. The search area was divided into sections, radiating from the car park. The first team followed the main walking track. Another crossed the creek where her GPS signal had last registered. At the same time, a canine handler released a search dog trained for human scent. The animal sniffed around the vehicle, circled twice, and began to move downhill toward the water, tail lowered, hesitant. Within minutes, it stopped. The rain from previous days had washed everything clean. By midday, the operation expanded. Volunteers from nearby towns joined the effort. They walked shoulder to shoulder through the undergrowth, calling her name, their voices echoing across the valley. Helicopters swept overhead, scanning the canopy for patches of color or movement. From above, the forest appeared endless, an ocean of green and mist, with no trace of human presence. Detective Inspector Stuart Wilkinson, who oversaw the initial phase, later described the conditions in his report. Visibility less than 20 meters, terrain unstable, moss and roots conceal voids beneath the surface, high risk of falls. It was a concise summary of what every rescuer already felt. The forest itself was working against them. Inside the command tent, officers examined Celine's belongings recovered from the car. Everything pointed to a short hike. Camera bag, a light jacket, half a bottle of water, no tent or food. She had not prepared for an overnight stay. Her passport and wallet were untouched, ruling out robbery. Her digital trail ended precisely at 4:18 p.m. on the 17th. After that, there was nothing. Not even a background app running long enough to suggest her phone had been switched off manually. By the second day, search teams began to worry about time. Temperatures at night had dropped below freezing, and intermittent snow made walking nearly impossible. The official focus shifted from rescue to recovery. Reporters gathered outside the perimeter, asking whether the police believed she might still be alive. The answer was careful. All possibilities remain open, but off record, rescuers admitted that exposure for even one night under those conditions could be fatal. The operation continued for another 10 days. Drone footage was analyzed frame by frame. Infrared cameras picked up heat signatures from small animals, but nothing larger. Specialized divers examined nearby creeks in case she had slipped into the water. Still, no clue surfaced. No clothing, no footprints, not even a broken branch. It was as though the forest had absorbed her completely. On the 5th day, a volunteer named Tom Bauer, a retired ranger, made a statement that lingered with investigators. The terrain doesn't give things back quickly. You can walk 10 feet from something and never see it. His words weren't an exaggeration. The rainforest floor was layered in decades of decomposed leaves and rotted wood, soft enough to swallow a boot print within hours. Beneath the moss, sinkholes opened unexpectedly, some deep enough to conceal a person. Those who had worked in the area knew it well. Meanwhile, contact was established with Céline's family in Belgium. Her mother Ariane and sister Emilie spoke daily with police through video calls. They provided photos, medical records, and the confirmation that she had missed her ferry booking to Melbourne on June 21st. That failure to appear, they said, was what had convinced them something was terribly wrong. The family's calm precision helped investigators reconstruct her final days. She had planned to leave Tasmania that week, meaning the walk on June 17th was likely her last planned excursion. Despite intense coverage in local media, tips from the public led nowhere. A hiker claimed to have seen a lone woman on the trail days earlier, but his description did not match her clothing. Another caller reported a white flash in the forest the night of the 17th, perhaps a light or reflection, but when checked, it was only distant car headlights. By July 10th, the search had cost thousands of hours and spanned more than 50 square kilometers. At a press briefing in Launceston, Commander Wilkinson made the announcement no family wants to hear. Based on expert medical advice, the conditions Miss Khmer would have faced are not survivable over this time frame. The official search will be suspended. However, this case remains open. Should credible information arise, operations will resume. It was a measured procedural statement, but behind it lay a sense of frustration shared by everyone involved. They had followed every procedure, combed every visible meter of ground, and the result was nothing. No evidence of foul play, no sign of accident, just the void left by one missing person in an environment vast enough to erase footprints and time. For the townspeople of Warra, life quickly returned to its slow rhythm. Yet the car park at Philosopher Falls changed. Tourists hesitated at its entrance, reading the laminated notice now pinned beside the trail map. Use caution. Walkers must inform someone of their route and expected return. Her disappearance became both warning and mystery, told in lowered voices at the local cafe. That winter, the rain never seemed to stop. The forest stayed green and closed as if guarding a secret. The last official note entered into the police file for July 2023 read simply, "Search concluded. Subject not located." And with that line, Céline Khmer's name moved from the list of active rescues to the long register of Tasmania's missing. The forest had won, for now. When a search ends, the paperwork begins. By late July 2023, the official investigation into the disappearance of Céline Khmer had entered what police call the open but dormant stage, a file left ready for any future lead, yet quietly stored among dozens of unresolved cases. But for her family, the case was not dormant at all. Thousands of kilometers away, in a small town in Belgium, the silence that followed the suspension of the search became its own kind of noise, an ache that refused to rest. Her mother, Ariane, kept her daughter's last messages open on her phone. The last words Céline had sent were ordinary, a short note about the weather in Tasmania, and a picture of the forest outside her window. There was no sign of fear or uncertainty. She looked peaceful, Ariane said later. That's what made it harder. It felt like she had just walked out of the picture. In early August, as the Tasmanian winter deepened, Ariane and Céline's older sister, Amélie, began organising their own search from Belgium. They contacted the Belgian embassy in Canberra, the Tasmanian police, and several European hiking forums. Volunteers began translating missing person posters into multiple languages. On social media, the hashtag Uro finds Céline Khmer started to circulate, mostly among expats and travellers who had once passed through Tasmania. It was a small ripple in a wide ocean, but it marked the beginning of what would become a family's relentless pursuit of answers. In September, an unexpected offer arrived. A private investigator named Ken Gamble, known for handling cybercrime and missing person cases, reached out to the family. Gamble had followed Celine's story in the press and believed that digital data, especially from her phone and Google account, could offer more clues than any ground search. With permission from both the family and the Tasmanian police, he began a parallel investigation. By then, months had passed since Celine's last recorded movement. The forest around Philosopher Falls had turned even less accessible. Heavy rain had triggered landslides, and sections of the track were temporarily closed to the public. For local authorities, the case was now statistical. One more fatality attributed to poor weather and isolation. But Gamble's approach was different. He was not looking for a survivor. He was looking for a pattern. In late October 2023, he gained access to Celine's Google account data, preserved by law for missing person inquiries. What he found surprised even the police. The data contained over 40 GPS coordinates, each one recorded automatically by her phone on the day she vanished. When plotted on a map, they traced her exact route from Warra to the Philosopher Falls car park, along the main trail, and then sharply veered away toward the northwest, crossing the creek into unmarked terrain. It was a small but significant deviation, just a few hundred meters off the path, but it led into one of the densest parts of the Taran rainforest, an area that had not been thoroughly searched during the original operation. The finding reignited hope. It meant there was a possibility, however slim, that something tangible, a piece of clothing, a camera, even a fragment of equipment might still be found. Gamble presented his data to Tasmanian police, who verified the GPS timeline and confirmed it matched the last known cell signal from June 17th at 4:18 p.m. The coordinates, however, were within a zone that had since become inaccessible due to flooding. Authorities noted the information, but declined to reopen a full-scale search without physical evidence or credible eyewitness reports. For the family, that decision was devastating. Amelie, who had inherited her sister's quiet determination, took over communication with Australian officials. "They think it's over," she said during a televised interview. "But for us, it's not over until we know where she is." As months passed, the case slipped from national headlines. Other stories filled the news cycle: bushfires, political changes, and new missing persons reports. Yet among those who had followed the search closely, the memory of Celine's disappearance lingered. It was not the sensational kind of case that stirred public outrage, but rather one that provoked reflection. How can a person vanish completely in a place so small, so documented, and yet so wild? In Warita, the locals who had once joined the search spoke of her rarely. The forest trail reopened quietly that November, and new visitors walked past the same warning signs that Celine must have seen months earlier. Some left flowers near the lookout platform, where her last photographs were likely taken. Others simply stood there in silence, unsure of what to feel. By December 2023, the Khmer family had gathered enough funding to travel to Tasmania. They planned to come the following spring, when conditions were safer. Ariane told reporters before the trip, "If we can't bring her home, we will at least find the place where she stopped walking." That sentence, "the place where she stopped walking," would become the quiet heart of the investigation. When the year ended, the police report remained unchanged. Case open, subject not located. But outside the system, a mother, a sister, and a small team of volunteers had already decided that the forest would not have the final word. And so, as 2024 began, the story of Celine's Khmer was no longer just a record of a disappearance. It became a measure of persistence, a search that refused to die simply because the paperwork said it should. In the early months of 2024, nearly a year after Celine's Khmer's disappearance, a new expedition began to form quietly. The official police file was still open, but inactive, its last entry dated July 2023. Yet thousands of kilometers away in Belgium, a mother and a sister were preparing to cross half the world to continue what authorities had set aside. They were not chasing miracles, they were chasing proof. Something, anything, that would end the uncertainty consuming every day since June 17th. When Ariane and Emily Khmer arrived in Tasmania in April 2024, autumn had begun. The air was cool and sharp, the hillsides painted with faint gold beneath the fog. They were joined by Ken Gamble, the private investigator whose analysis of Selene's Google data had uncovered 40 precise GPS points. With local volunteers, bush trackers, and a small technical team, they set up a new base near Warat. Unlike the first police operation, this was not a rescue. It was a methodical search for remains or belongings, a mission defined by patience and restraint. Ken's plan was straightforward but demanding. Using the coordinates from Selene's phone, his team would retrace her last known path, this time extending beyond the main Philosopher Falls trail and into the section where the GPS data had abruptly stopped. The area was barely accessible. It had no tracks, only dense undergrowth and fallen trees layered in moss. To move through it required crawling, climbing, or cutting through wet vegetation. Some days, the team covered less than 200 meters. A local drone specialist, Daniel Wood, joined the operation with advanced LAR technology, a scanning system capable of mapping the forest floor beneath the canopy. By combining Selene's GPS route with high-resolution aerial scans, they could identify subtle ground changes, depressions, clearings, or anomalies that might indicate disturbed soil. It was technology rarely used in civilian missing person searches, and it gave the expedition an almost forensic precision. For days, drones hovered above the trees, sending back green and gray images like X-rays of the Earth. Occasionally, the software marked a point of interest. Volunteers hiked to each spot, pushing through ferns taller than their shoulders. Most turned out to be nothing: rocks, fallen branches, or shadows mistaken for shapes. Yet each false alarm carried its own emotional weight. Every time they reached a location marked possible find, Ariane's breath would catch for a moment before reality settled back in. In an interview recorded that May, Ken described her composure. She never broke down in the field. She would walk quietly behind the others, eyes scanning the ground. Only when we called it a day would she sit in the car and hold her daughter's photo.
She said very little, but we could feel what it cost her.
The expedition lasted nearly 3 weeks. They searched along ridgel lines, creek beds and sinkholes, geological features notorious in the terrain for collapsing underweight and concealing anything that falls in. One sinkhole, near the last GPS coordinate, was large enough to swallow a small car filled with rainwater and leaves. Divers inspected it, but found nothing. The searchers learned quickly what local rangers had said the year before. This was a landscape that hid its secrets well. Midway through May, the team's drone captured a faint irregularity on the forest floor, a discoloration about 1 kilometer from the creek crossing. The shape looked vaguely human in thermal imaging. When ground teams reached the spot the following day, they found only a patch of moss-covered bark and soil that had been disturbed by animal activity. Another dead end. Despite the setbacks, the expedition had value. Gamble's data confirmed that Selene had not traveled far from the main trail, perhaps only 700 to 900 meters at most, before losing her way. Based on her direction and the terrain, the team hypothesized she had tried to navigate using her phone's map, unaware that the screen's GPS indicator could still function even without signal. If the path shown was slightly misaligned, it might have led her deeper into the forest under the illusion of being close to the car park. This theory aligned with what experts call destination confusion, a common phenomenon in outdoor navigation, where individuals believe they are approaching safety when in fact moving farther from it. In Tasmania's damp cold, such a mistake can turn fatal within hours. When the team concluded their final sweep in late May, they gathered for a small moment of reflection at the waterfall platform. The forest was silent, its mist drifting slowly between the trees. No discovery had been made, but a sense of closure began to form in the way they stood together, facing the same unseen truth. Before leaving, Ariane placed a single laminated photograph on the wooden railing, a picture of Selene smiling on another trail months before her disappearance. She did not speak. The others stepped back, letting her have the moment. Later, when asked whether she believed her daughter was still alive, she answered plainly, "No, I think she died here, but I want to know where." That's all any mother asks for, to know where. After the family returned to Belgium, Ken Gamble prepared a detailed report for Tasmanian police. His conclusion was concise. Based on available GPS data, environmental factors, and terrain analysis, it is probable that Miss Khmer remains within 1 kilometer of her last recorded location. The police acknowledged his findings. They thanked him, updated the file, and added a single line to the end of the document. If new evidence emerges, ground search may resume. That was all. No arrests, no foul play, no final discovery, just a reaffirmation that somewhere in that forest, hidden beneath moss and thyme, lay the answer everyone had been seeking. And though the search had ended once more, the silence that followed felt different this time. Not the silence of uncertainty, but of reluctant acceptance. The kind that comes when truth no longer needs to be spoken aloud because every tree, every stone already seems to know it. By June 2024, 1 year after the day Celine vanished, Tasmania police released their final report to the public. It was measured, brief, and written in the restrained tone typical of official findings. It stated that the investigation had found no evidence of criminal involvement and that environmental exposure in remote terrain is the most probable cause of death. To the press, it was the logical conclusion of a tragic accident. To those who had followed the case closely, it was a statement that explained everything and nothing at once. At the same time, independent investigators, journalists, and online communities began to dissect the case, searching for inconsistencies. Every unsolved disappearance invites theory. It is the nature of uncertainty. The first theory, the most widely accepted, was accidental disorientation. According to search and rescue experts, this was consistent with the GPS data. Celine's last known location placed her off the established path in an area of dense forest with numerous watercourses and sinkholes. In such conditions, even experienced hikers could lose their sense of direction in minutes. As the daylight faded, hypothermia would have set in quickly. A second theory suggested that she might have fallen into a sinkhole or crease, the kind that collapses silently underfoot. In Tasmania's Taurine region, such formations are common. The rainforest floor is a living surface, soft, wet, layered with decades of decay. A body could be buried within hours, swallowed by soil and roots. Search dogs would lose the scent. Heat-seeking cameras would detect nothing. The forest, in effect, erases evidence as efficiently as water erases footprints. But there was another theory, one that emerged from the unease people feel when explanations sound too tidy. It proposed that Celine might not have been alone that day. A handful of online users, citing unverified posts, claimed that her phone had briefly connected to another Bluetooth device in the area. A reading later confirmed by digital analysts as inconclusive. Others speculated about unregistered campers, passing motorists, or chance encounters. The police investigated these claims quietly and found nothing. The file contained no reports of suspicious vehicles or unidentified persons near Philosopher Falls at the time. Detective Stuart Wilkinson, who had overseen the original operation, addressed these rumors during an interview that winter. There are always alternative narratives when someone disappears. The truth is simpler. This was a tragic misjudgment in a dangerous environment.
No one followed her. The forest itself is what took her.
He spoke without emotion, but not without empathy. He had seen similar cases before. Hikers, travelers, even locals who underestimated the land they loved. The tragedy of Celine's case, he later told colleagues, was not mystery, but timing. She was so close to the end of the trail, 50 more steps in the right direction, and she'd have seen the car park. Still, not everyone was convinced. Among those who had joined the private searches, there was a lingering feeling that something about the timeline did not fit. The gap between her leaving the trail and the loss of phone signal was short, perhaps too short for her to have wandered deep enough to vanish without trace. Ken Gamble's report noted this anomaly, but left it open. The final GPS point may indicate sudden loss of mobility, device obstruction, or immediate incapacitation. What could have caused such an event? The possibilities were limited: a fall, a strike to the head, or sudden exposure to freezing water. Any of them could render a person unconscious within minutes. In a forest that cold, An injury is not only dangerous, it is terminal. When asked whether he would classify the case as solved, Gamble refused the term. Solved implies we found something, he said. We didn't, but we understand the most probable sequence, and that's the closest we'll get to truth. For Ariane, the official conclusion brought a strange calm. She no longer believed in rescue, only in understanding. During a radio interview in Belgium, she said, "If she died in that forest, I hope she saw beauty before it happened." That's what she was there for, the light, the silence. Maybe that's where she still is. It was the kind of statement that settled the air rather than stirred it. Her sister, Amelie, less accepting, focused instead on advocacy. She began working with travel groups and safety organizations to promote awareness for solo travelers in remote areas. "You can be cautious and still disappear," she often said. Her tone was not angry, only factual. Preparedness doesn't mean protection. Nature doesn't negotiate. In Tasmania, the community of Warra quietly installed a new signpost near the Philosopher Falls car park. Beneath the standard warnings about weather and equipment, one line had been added. "In memory of those who walked into the forest and never returned." The sign bore no name, but locals knew who it was for. Visitors still asked questions. They still looked at the trail with mixed curiosity and respect. The name Celine was spoken less often, but the caution she left behind endured. The forest, indifferent as ever, went on. Rain continued to fall, moss thickened over stones, and the track remained open for those who believed they could pass through untouched. But for anyone who stood there long enough, listening to the water rush beneath the ferns, there was always the same thought. The distance between safety and disappearance is smaller than anyone imagines. And in that thought lies the final echo of the case. Not fear, not mystery, but the simple humbling reminder that in some places, even the earth itself keeps its secrets longer than we are willing to wait. In August 2024, the file labeled Missing Person Khmer Celine Aylan was formally reviewed at the Hobart headquarters of Tasmania Police. The review was procedural. Every unresolved disappearance must be revisited 12 months after the last recorded activity. Detective Inspector Wilkinson sat at the end of the table, the same officer who had stood before cameras the previous year, announcing the suspension of the search. The meeting lasted less than an hour. Nothing new had surfaced. The GPS findings from Ken Gamble's private report were entered into record, acknowledged, and archived. The legal framework allowed one final step: the preparation of a presumption of death certificate to be issued if the family requested it. In most jurisdictions, that process is mechanical. A person missing more than 12 months with strong evidence of exposure to fatal conditions may be legally declared deceased. It provides closure for families, closure of estates, insurance, and documentation. But for Ariane Khmer, the mother who had crossed the world to walk the same ground her daughter disappeared on, paperwork meant little. She wrote a short letter declining to sign. "We will wait," she told the coroner. "If we are to bury her, I want to know where she lies." Her refusal was not emotional, it was precise. Once a declaration of death is filed, the case shifts from active inquiry to record. Leads grow cold and resources disappear. By keeping the file open, even symbolically, the family kept alive a small window for new evidence. Meanwhile, questions of responsibility began to circle in quieter forums, not about crime, but about risk management. Had the park authority underestimated the dangers of Philosopher Falls? Were safety measures adequate? Visitors are required only to sign a logbook and obey a handful of warning signs. In 2022, before Celine arrived, 2 hikers had suffered serious falls in the same area. Both were rescued within hours. After her disappearance, officials reviewed trail conditions and concluded that no negligence had occurred. The track met national standards, and the weather that weekend, though poor, had not been classified as extreme. For the legal system, that was the end of the question. For others, it remained open. Travel safety advocates argued that tourists from overseas, unfamiliar with Tasmania's volatile climate, needed clearer guidance. A campaign began to install new digital checkpoints at major trailheads, a system allowing hikers to register via smartphone, logging their time of entry and expected return. It was quietly inspired by her case. Back in Belgium, the Kramer family's life rearranged itself around absence. The media attention faded, as it always does. Ariane returned to work at a local library. Emily took up a volunteer position with a missing persons charity. Neither spoke of closure, but both referred to time as before and after. Her belongings, camera equipment, journals, clothing, remained boxed in the spare room, unaltered. In the corner of the box lay a small SD card, recovered from her laptop weeks before she vanished. It contained hundreds of photographs from her travels. Fog over a mountain lake, reflections of trees and rainwater, an empty bench facing the sea. In many of them, the camera had captured more sky than ground, as if she were always searching upward. When asked by a journalist whether they believed in justice, Ariane's response was measured. Justice applies when there's wrongdoing. This wasn't that. This was a conversation between a person and the land answered in its own way. In November, the coroner's inquest issued a short memorandum, no inquest required, citing the available evidence and the absence of criminal findings. The final paragraph read, "It is the opinion of this office that Ms. Kramer likely succumbed to environmental exposure shortly after leaving the Philosopher Falls Trail on or about June 17, 2023. The case was officially closed to legal inquiry, yet closed is not the same as ended. Each winter since her disappearance, the local police in Wara still receive calls from hikers claiming to have found something. A boot, a strap, a scrap of fabric. Each time officers hike into the forest to check. Each time the objects prove unrelated. The reports are filed, date stamped, and added to the case folder under the simple heading, unconfirmed. In the logic of law, Celine Kramer's disappearance had reached equilibrium. No suspect, no body, no further action. But in the quiet space between fact and feeling, the story continued to breathe. Her mother's refusal to sign the declaration of death meant that somewhere, officially and indefinitely, Celine was still considered missing. As 2025 approached, that absence took on the weight of permanence. Not because anyone believed she was alive, but because they were not ready to give the forest the final word. In a way, the law and the family agreed on one point. Without a body, the truth remains unfinished. And so, in the legal sense, she exists in both worlds. Gone, but not gone enough. The record says missing, presumed dead. The heart says missing, period. It is a rare balance, and one that may last forever. By early 2025, nearly 2 years after Celine Kramer vanished, the case had settled into that quiet phase familiar to anyone who works around loss. Not resolution, but endurance. There were no more official updates, no new sightings, no fresh discoveries in the Tarkine forest. The media no longer called. Yet, for the people who had carried her name this far, the story refused to fade. In March, Ariane Kramer returned once more to Tasmania. She arrived without the press or formal escorts, only her daughter Emily and 2 volunteers from the original search group. They brought a single purpose: to walk the Philosopher Falls Trail again, to leave something behind. It was not an expedition this time, but a pilgrimage. The morning they set out, the forest looked much as it had on the day Celine disappeared, wet, glistening, alive with the sound of water. Moss covered the old timber steps, ferns bowed under the weight of mist. The new sign at the trailhead stood out in silver and green, bearing its warning to hikers, and the quiet memorial line that everyone knew referred to her. In memory of those who walked into the forest and never returned. The group stopped where the walkway began to narrow near the wooden railing overlooking the falls. Ariane placed a small bronze plaque beneath the handrail, fixed discreetly with 2 screws. It bore no dates, no epitaphs, only her daughter's name and a short line engraved beneath it. She loved quiet places. For several minutes no one spoke. Then, in a gesture as deliberate as it was simple, Ariane opened Celine's old camera bag. From it she took one photograph, a print of her daughter standing in a different forest months earlier, smiling with sunlight in her hair, and slipped it inside the gap between the boards. The paper caught on a nail, fluttered once, and stayed. It was the kind of small act that has more gravity than any public monument. When they left the forest later that afternoon, the weather shifted. The fog began to clear, and thin light filtered through the canopy. Ariane looked back once toward the trailhead, then turned away. That was the last time she spoke publicly of returning. Afterward, she and Emily traveled to Hobart to meet with the detectives who had handled the case. They thanked them quietly, without bitterness. Wilkinson, the senior officer, later said that hers was the kind of grace that teaches the rest of us how to carry failure. He asked if she wanted a final statement added to the file. She nodded and handed him a folded page she had written on the flight from Belgium. It read, "I accept what the forest decided, but I do not call it peace. When her body is found, the case will be complete. Until then, it remains open, as love does." That note was entered into the case log under document 93, family statement. It is now the fourth final item in the file. Life moved forward as it always does. In Belgium, Emily continued to work with a volunteer organization that assists families of the missing. She often began her talks with her sister's story, emphasizing preparation and communication for solo travelers. Her tone was practical, never sentimental. "We can't remove danger," she would say. "We can only reduce surprise." Each year on the anniversary of Celine's disappearance, a handful of local residents in Warra leave wild flowers on the trail sign. No announcement, no ceremony. Sometimes tourists see the blooms and assume a wedding took place there. They don't know that the flowers mark a boundary between the known and the unknowable.
In December 2025, nearly exactly 2 years after her last sighting, Ken Gamble returned to Tasmania to participate in a small, privately funded search alongside several of Celine's friends. The group combed the dense ridge near the creek one final time, guided by updated LAR scans. Nothing was found. When asked by local media whether he still believed she was there, he answered simply, "Yes, the forest keeps its promises." By then, the story of Celine Camille had moved from news to legend, one of those modern myths that linger in the margins of travel guides and warning posters. Yet within it lies no mystery, no villain, only a precise set of circumstances that aligned on one cold afternoon. A wrong step, a fading light, a silent wilderness. And still, in the human part of the story, something softer remains. In the Camille home back in Belgium, Celine's belongings are kept in a single wooden chest. On top of it rests the last photograph recovered from her camera, an image of mist curling above a river, untouched, unedited. Her mother once said she believed that if anyone were to find the memory card, that would be the picture they'd see first. Every year since, when asked what she hopes for, Ariane gives the same answer. Not for her return, for her to be found, for the story to have a place to end. That is the final line of the case as it exists. A record without conclusion, a question suspended between law and love. The forest remains, as it always has, ancient, wet, and indifferent. But somewhere within its stillness, a single name continues to echo softly, like the sound of falling water fading into mist. If stories like this remind you that truth deserves to be remembered, subscribe to this channel and share where you're watching from. Every view keeps the light on for someone still waiting to be found.